The Indian agent, whose last name was Henniger, drove my mother to the hospital because there was hardly any cars here at the time. Very little, very few people had cars. And so anyway, I was driven to, my mother was, and she had me. When my father got out of the army, in about 51, 52 maybe, 1951, I think he came home because he was a peacekeeper in Germany. So when he came home, he got jobs off the reserve, working at the airport, Halifax Airport, International Airport. He worked at the Ferry Aviation, actually, repairing planes. And then he worked at the Institute of Oceanography in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And the first job, the airport one, I remember when we were children, he had to walk a lot of the times out to the highway, which is like 5 miles. And it would be storm and snowstorms and that, and he would still have to walk the entire 5 miles. He would have to leave really early in the morning. And so, he was determined to get to work. Eventually, he got a vehicle. My grandmother's maiden name actually was Francis. She was Sarah Francis. And my grandfather, Levi Syllaboy, so she would be Sarah Syllaboy when she got married. And my grandfather, as far as I can remember, he was born in Nyanza. And he migrated to New Glasgow, which is not far from Pictou Landing. And he used to work at the mill there in New Glasgow, lumber mill, I believe. And my grandmother, Sarah, she used to clean houses for the people in town. And she would walk back and forth to work a lot because, as every other small community, they didn't have very many vehicles, so they had no choice but to walk. We'd all go to Mulligomich, they call it, to the island every summer, for the St. Anne's Mission. So we'd go over in this really big old boat. I know they could fit a lot of people on there. And they would put my grandmother's wheelchair on there, of course, first, and then my grandfather and other family members would, help get my grandmother on there. And they always had a cabin over there and stuff. So, and she had, a lot of family in Pictou Landing as well. So they used to help out a lot too. So quite, a lot of people from Pictou Landing and Indian Brook and from other First Nation communities used to go to those missions. And a lot of children. And so I'm not sure, I'm not sure how many children go today, but I know back in the day we all had to go, so. And so that was, that was at least something to look forward to. You were going to go somewhere when the summer came. My father had this car, and so you didn't have to wear seatbelts at the time. So they would put all of us girls in the back seat of the car, and my father would make these homemade roof racks for the roof of the car. And we must have looked like Beverly Hillbillies or somebody, I don't know. But anyway, he'd put all the, some blankets and whatever else we needed to go to Maine with. And our top of our car had everything in it. And so some of us would have to sit on the floor even in the car, in the back seat there, and the floor. And even there was times when one of the girls would lay on the back window, at that time, seat belts weren't required. We used to rake blueberries. Today they would call it child labor. But I can remember we had to earn our school clothes. So I remember having this little rake, and they'd show us how to rake. So we used to rake all day. We were allowed to stop to have a little break and have a cold drink and stuff every couple hours. And then my mother would make us a lunch, and we would have sandwiches and Kool-Aid at lunchtime, and we weren't allowed to break very long, and then we had to get back in the field. But we always came home with a nice car anyway from Maine. So, but it's not only cherry field and that where we used to go. We used to go to when we were done the blueberry picking, we would go over to Aroostook County towards Presque Isle Way to do the potato picking season. And we were always, I would say, about a month late for school. But we did have, like, you know, new clothes to go to school and boots and stuff like that, things we were going to need for school. So
how young were you when you were raking berries?
5.
5 years?
You know, the rakes were so small, I remember. You know, they were made for children, right? And I don't know if they might have some somewhere in some museums or maybe even, you know, in the antique store, something like that. My youngest sister was 2 years old, I guess, when my mother left for the United States. And so he took my 3 youngest sisters to work with him. He worked around the community, and for what they pay one person today now in today's society, back in the day, my father used to do all those jobs. He was the plumber, he was the electrician. He was like kind of a jack of all trades, if you will, like that's what they kind of refer to those guys as. And my own oldest son, he's like that too. He's a jack of all trades. So, and they were very good at it. He was very good at it. Like, you know, he took care of all the yards up there and cleaned all the old band office and the school and everything. And then my grandparents on my mother's side eventually started cleaning the school. And so that took, but he still took care of all the yards, all on top of the hill there. And, like I say, he took my 3 youngest sisters to work with him till they were school age. My dad had a lot of help, like, you know, after my mom left, from my Aunt Alice Sillaboy and, you know, like from my grandparents and from Gudlin J. and Julian and some other of the, you know, neighbors. Like they would come over and teach us how to make homemade bread, or my father made looskeniggen, like, or molasses looskeniggen with raisins in it, or and stews were a big thing because they would you could feed a lot of people with a stew. So you know, with the vegetables and the meat and stuff, and people that would hunt and fish, stuff like that. Like, you know, they would bring. My dad was so busy raising us and working that, you know, he didn't have time for the hunting and fishing and that sort of thing. So, but a lot of the guys were really good like that. They used to bring him over some rabbit and moose meat and deer meat and stuff like that. So, but so, and our house was very clean, I have to say, and people were amazed that, you know, we were raised by a man, and you know, they said we can go in Joe Levi's any time of the day or night. They said, and his house is very clean, you know, and that's because we were all given chores. And so we managed. It was a 6-bedroom house because it was 4 bedrooms, and then my dad put on another extension. So we had 6 bedrooms upstairs. And then it was kind of like the 7 Dwarfs, I guess, because he opened up all the walls in the one side of the house, and we had one great big long bedroom, and our single beds were all in a row. So when I think about it now, yeah, we were, like, you know, we were all in a row, and he would check to make sure everybody was in bed and stuff, you know. So, and but when I think about it now today, you know, like that was a big job. I mean, you know, 7 girls and 1 man raising 7 girls, working full time, and even at night somebody would come and say they need their furnace looked at or something, you know, and he would go and help them out, you know. The Indian agents told my grandfather that they had to move out of Pictou Landing and move to Shubenacadie, where they would have rich farmlands and be able to make a living and that sort of thing. And but, you know, my grandfather didn't realize that they were going to put them 5 miles back in the woods. So, and it was actually, I guess, mostly the Dutch people and that got the rich farmlands down by the Shubby town. So, and then my grandfather's house wasn't there anymore, my grandparents' home. So they basically, you know, had no choice but to live here. And my grandfather was told that they wouldn't get any more help, you know, from social or anybody, like, you know, any more assistance if they needed it. From the Indian agents were telling them that, like, he had no choice but to live here. So, anyways, my grandfather got I remember 2 great big workhorses, and he got this big sleigh. I'm not sure if he built it. It was a very, very big sleigh, and he would haul the logs out of the woods. And then also he would take us, since we lived right next door, he would take us for sleigh rides in the winter, put a lot of the grandchildren on that lived all around the area. Whoever wanted to go for a sleigh ride, he would take us. I used to go over my grandfather's a lot in the mornings and before school. And I'd go and say hello and see how they were doing. And and my grandfather would always have oatmeal porridge ready for me and molasses. He used to call me Pancake. That's the only name he had for me was Pancake. And so anyways, I used to go over and he'd say to me, Pancake, you know, can you stay with your grandmother? I have to go to the store and get some food or something like that. And he would always buy me something for staying with my grandmother. And, or my grandmother too, she had rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, I think I'm pronouncing it right. But she was very crippled. Her hands and her feet were all twisted and everything. But somehow she'd put all these different needles through her fingers and stuff, and she would make these beautiful Afghans, they call them, I believe. And quilts, she could make some quilts. And area rugs, she would make those. My mother's parents, Sarah McDonald Paul and Bill Paul. And a lot of people referred to my grandmother as Sadie. My grandparents used to clean the school on top of the hill. And at that time they had built a brick school. And so my grandfather was also the janitor in that school as well, and helped my grandmother clean. And then my grandmother's sister, Ella, was married to Steve Knockwood, and they had a store right on top of the hill as well. There was the school, the church, and then down a little there was the convent for the nuns, and then next door to them was the priest. My grandfather, Paul, he made the rustic chairs, and he was a guide for the hunters and the fishermen and that. Mostly, a lot of hunters come from the States and that. He was a guide for them. And he had a cabin in Sheet Harbor, I think. Sheet Harbor and Grand Lake, I believe he had cabins there. So, but he was a guide for the hunters and stuff like that. So, but he knew the woods very well. And I remember when we used to get sick when we were children, he would make this, some kind of medicine. He would go in the woods and he'd pick this, I don't know, he'd scrape these trees anyways, and he'd come home and boil all this stuff up and put some sort of syrup in it or something and put it in bottles. And something like that, I guess you referred to Buckley today, but this was sweetened a little bit. But it still tastes awful. And we'd see him coming when we were sick, and I'd say, oh no, here comes Granddaddy with his medicine. School went to grade 6 on the reserve. And then eventually we were bused off to Milford High School there, junior high, grade 7. Grade 7. And I remember that's the first time I ever encountered racism. You know, is when I started junior high down in Hants East, because they were very racist at the time. I remember having conversations with my father about, I said, the teachers don't like Indians. I said, you know, the principal don't like Indians. I said, you know, the other children at the school, I said, you know, who are not native, I said, they don't like Indians either. So I said, you know, it's really hard to go to school there. I said, because, you know, they don't like us. And so my father would say, well, you know, you're going to school to learn, so just try to ignore all that. But it was pretty hard to ignore, you know, at times. So I ended up, you know, like I said to my father when my mother left, I said to my dad, because my oldest sister, she left too with my mom. And I'd be about 12, I guess. And I said to my dad, going on 13, around there, 12. So, you know, I'd say to my dad, you know, like, yeah, I must have been about 14. I went to school till I was about 14, maybe going on 15. But I said to my dad, I'm getting very tired. I said, you know, washing, helping, I'd help with the laundry at night and stuff like that. And so helping with the housework and whatever had to be done. It left us very tired in school, and I remember falling asleep at times in school. So I said to my father, I can't do both. I can't go to school, and I can't help you at home here. So I have to do one or the other. I can't do both because I'm falling asleep, I said, in school. So my father let me quit school at the time. And I said, I can go back later to school. I said, later on, but for now, I'm going to have to help you at home. So that's how that was back in the day. Once in a while, we would find like lady slippers. There was a lot of them in behind Carol Ann's house, which is Agadai and Chappie Francis' house, where they used to live. I just want to mention about us. We went too far that way one day, and we walked too far in and we got lost. But this story always sticks with me, you know, because Carol Ann was the brave one. I was the one that thought, you know, we were doomed. We were going to die, and that was it. So I blessed myself and start praying and everything and just waiting to die, I guess. And Carol Ann said, don't be afraid, she said. My grandfather said, if you ever get lost in the woods, she said, spit on your hand and slap your hand, she said. And whichever way the spit flies, that's the way you get out, she said. So she spit on her hand and slapped her hand, and the spit went flying. She said, come on. So, oh my God, we kept walking. In the meantime, our parents and, you know, other people were getting worried about us. So, and it started to get kind of dark, like with summertime, and we walked seemed like we were walking forever. And we came out in Mill Village, believe it or not. We were only young girls, I don't know, school age anyway. Maybe we might have been 7 or 8 or something. We weren't very old. But we were very adventuresome. We were very curious about a lot of stuff, you know, so we were like to. And then, so when we got lost and we came out in Mill Village, I said, well, we're going to have to go to one of those houses, and I asked them if they can call JJ. So I said, John Julian, asked them if they can look up in the phone book. I said, they can run across and get my phone across the road. So that's what we did. We went to a house that we seen, and we didn't know who lived there. We had no idea, but knocked on the door for help anyway. And so the woman did, you know, the woman and man told us to come in, and they were very good, like, you know. And so they called, and they got a hold of over JJ's there, and then somebody went to get my dad, so they came out to pick us up, and just in time, it was just getting dark. In the winter, we'd have to be outside in the blizzards, snowstorms and everything, but if we weren't doing chores, we had to be outside. So, and we used to get a lot of snow, big high snow drifts. So we started making ourselves these tunnels and snow houses and stuff. And when we all crowded in there, believe it or not, it was warm. So we learned how to keep ourselves warm, like, you know, and but it's just, you know, like they had so many kids back in the day, like big families, like, you know, oh my goodness, 8, 10, 12, 14 kids or whatever, you know. And that's just the way it was. There was a lot of big families around here, you know, so that's what we did. We just made our own fun. We were creative, like we had to just whatever we thought up, like, you know. And I remember watching the Tarzan and Jane movie on Saturday, and I said to, actually it was Carol Ann Francis that I said, we can do that, Carol Ann. And she said, what? I said, we can do that swinging from tree to tree all afternoon, I said. And she said, really? I said, yeah, we can do that. She said, are you going to go first? I said, sure, I'll go first. I said, that's easy. So I said, we'll have real good fun. So I climbed way up in this tree. In behind our house there we had in Hollywood. And I climbed way up in this tree. It was all woods back here then. There was no houses, no subdivisions, no nothing, all woods. So you didn't have to go very far in to find a big tree to climb up. So I let out a holler like Tarzan and the branch broke. When I jumped, and oh my goodness, I sprained my ankle, and she had to run out, and JJ, Julian was the constable then, so he had come running in, and oh my goodness, I was screaming and hollering, my ankle was swollen, like, and so JJ carried me out to the woods. So my career as trying that kind of stuff was short-lived because, you know, it wasn't as easy as it looked. Me and Carol Ann Francis, we had when we got a little bit older, and we were about 10, I guess, grade 4. And so we got a job on Saturdays cleaning for the nuns. So, and the cook, the nun that cooked, she used to feed us really good. She fed us breakfast and lunch, and oh my goodness, we were stuffed. She was a really good cook. And then she'd give us a big paper bag full of food. I don't know if it was 1 or 2, but anyway, she quite a good sized paper bag, and she'd fill it with some food, cookies and all kinds of different things to take home, like, you know, stuff for hot chocolate, and she'd just fill our bags right up. And then we get in envelopes with our names on it, and we get $1.25 each, and to us at that time that was pretty good. So yeah, we, you know, like so we did that for a couple of years, you know, too, like every Saturday, that was our job. You know, most of us, like my father, as we got older, he told us to leave here. He said, you need to go to school or you need to work. And so he said, you know, go out there, he said, and, you know, either go back to school, find a job, or you got to do something. Because he said, here, he said, there's very limited, there's nothing really here for you, young people. So he said, you need to go out there and find a job or go back to school or, you know, just find your way sort of thing, eh? And really, he was doing us a favor because that's what we did. We all, you know, ended up going back to school and getting more education, you know, and ended up with, you know, pretty decent jobs, you know. So, but our work ethic, you know, like started at a very early age. So we were just raised like that, you know. So we all of us always worked and looked after our children and stuff. And, you know, our homes were always clean. Our children were clean, and we could cook fairly well, you know. And or sometime we'd just come home and my dad would make us like looskennigan or something, you know. So if we wanted to taste it, or some other of the relatives, family and friends, you know. My uncle, Isaac Silverboy, he could make very good looskennigan as well. So when we wanted a taste of, you know, home, that's what we would do. We'd come home and ask them to bake us something.